Good morning. It's about 8:30 in the morning. You can tell I've been kind of letting my hair grow out a little bit. Well, different times, huh? Today I was going to make a video talking about the whole self-isolation thing. Not to be trendy, not to be talking about pop topics per se, but more so that about 5 years ago, I entered a cycle of downsizing and a pretty dramatic level of self-isolation, just naturally by the circumstances of my life. I'd been raising 2 kids with a partner, and their kids ended up moving with their mom. And I found myself suddenly single, and I moved from a house with 4 people in it to a little house by myself. And not only was it the physical downsizing, but it was also the emotional downsizing. My career was kind of floundering. Everything was just kind of dissolving. And in hindsight, I can see why, but at the time, it was very frightening. So, I'm sitting there in my little house. It's a 10 by 12 main structure with a loft and then a little side bathroom, little side kitchenette. Very humble, to say the least. Very beautiful, but very humble, very peaceful. And I was going through all sorts of self-value, self-worth issues. Going from being somebody who kind of worked in LA and had moved away, and basically a lot of the stuff that I invested my ego in, my career and the work that I did, kind of just dwindled. And then being by myself, you start to feel things that maybe you haven't felt before, and you have a lot of time to get to know yourself. So, in hindsight, of course it was all worth it. Of course it was valuable for me in finding peace with myself. You have to be with yourself to find peace with yourself and get to know who you really are and feel these things we don't always want to feel. So I find it really interesting how all of a sudden the world's kind of all in this space together, and it's not the same for everyone, but I assume that there's a lot of people who might find themselves isolated or alone, and looking at their jobs and their careers and wondering what the future holds, how they're going to get through this next so many months. But the primary thing I wanted to talk about within that is how we often build our identities around things that are temporal or temporary, meaning fashion, image, circles, cliques, jobs, money, materialism, but this also bleeds into areas that are easier to hide in also, as in our personalities and how we portray and project ourselves out there into the world and what we get out of it. You see this a lot in social media, stuff like this, with videos like this. People really putting an image out to collect social currency. So here we are, we're all at home, not knowing what the future holds, and maybe for some of us, out of our own just lack of knowing or lack of guidance in our lives, have things breaking down that we rely on for our sense of self. And the reason I'm making this video is because it's really important to recognize that when you're going through these periods of letting go of things of that sort, that it's not really who you are. And as I went through my own cycle and process of breaking down, what I recognized or learned in the process, which I found really interesting, I'd always heard of like Buddhism and meditation. I thought I kind of knew about it, but as I faced my own demise, so to say, my own self-image breakdown, which really felt real at the time. Now in hindsight, I realize it was just values and sense of self that wasn't necessarily accurate. Anyway, the point is that everything in the material world is transient. It's temporary. Our stay here in these bodies is temporary. I mean, everything. I mean, all of it, and it's easy to see that. So these circumstances that we're in, it's only going to be a certain amount of time. And so if you look to the world, it can seem absurd because everything's temporary. And it feels like we can't get our footing. And if we invest in those things that I was talking about, all these temporary things, materialism, who I am based on this or that or whatever, at some point that's going to be extracted from us or taken from us. And along with that goes our sense of self that we created by investing in that. So how do we repair that? How do we fix that? How do we adjust that? Well, first we have to understand what's temporary and transient and what's consistent and eternal. Now, what's temporary and transitory is everything in the material world. So identifying with the material world is kind of a hose job. You trick yourself. So now we're in a body and we have these experiences and we're going through this phenomena and all these things, of course. But identifying with that as who you are is dangerous territory. Like I said, because it'll be taken from you at some point. So what we do then is we look to well, what is eternal? And the idea in a lot of spiritual traditions is that consciousness is the only thing that persists. So life becomes much more focused on our state of being and less about our state of getting or the temporary things that arise and descend around us in this experience. So it becomes much more of a centered, focused reality of constantly checking in with your experience, how you're feeling, less about thinking about manipulating and cunning abilities to adjust things, to get things so we can get more things that aren't going to make us happy, more sensory stimulation, as though that's going to make us happy, knowing with the wisdom teachers always had known that would never get us or bring us happiness. So I digress a little bit, but the point is, in these times that we're in right now, we may be sitting at home alone. We might be reflecting on life and all these things and all these transitory things, jobs ending, things beginning, things ending. I'm going through a tunnel, so it's kind of cool. And feeling emotions and feeling all these things, and just keep in mind that it's all what we invest in and how we create and what we're creating based on what we invest in. So, if you recognize yourself as persistent eternal consciousness, then you can see that you were never born and that you never die. You can see that you are here, but you are not of it. You can be a visitor and explore without holding too many attachments to the experience that we're in. And it becomes very liberating. It becomes very freeing. Now, does it take away a lot of the things that we were born, all these stories of when we were born about, the prince and the princess and the this and the that and getting this and being powerful and all these things? Yeah, it does. It does take away all that excitement. And we can get into the excitement. We can get into power plays. We can get into being somebody important. We can do all those things here. That's totally up to you. But it's just understanding the price and the temporary nature of all the experiences that we choose to have here that we need to be cognitive of. So, it's like the Joker in the card deck. The Joker can play any role, whereas everyone else is the king, the queen, and they really believe that they're all these things. The Joker can be any of those things, and that's really kind of what the goal is to become the Joker. And that's something Alan Watts talks about a lot, is to become the Joker, being somebody who can be anyone, understanding the true nature of the reality that we're in. So anyway, as you're at home with your family, doing your things, reflecting on life, just remember that this is all temporary, and it's a great time to meditate on who and what you really are, which is persistent consciousness. Now again, don't get lost in just that. I mean, we are here having an experience, but just balance it out, knowing that these things that we identify with aren't necessarily really what we are, and that we can really generate a lot of fear and unsettled feelings when we face losing something that we identify with. All right, be good out there. Take care, guys. Bye.